Christine, welcome to the Scenic Route Podcast. How are you?
It's good. How about you? Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. It's always interesting to talk to a fellow brand professional. So we're gonna nerd out a bit today, I suppose. So please forgive us, but we're covering so much more than just like how to slap a logo on your business, because we have a similar understanding of branding that goes very deep to the core of who you are and what you stand for. And with that, there's really one thing we we always come back to again and again and again, and it's, well, what are your values? Like how do you like make decisions that are right for you personally and for your business? And with decisions, this always brings me to the interesting question. What is like, Christine, what is like a decision that you made for your business that was like truly like a pivotal moment?
Oh, this is such a good one. I feel like the best decision that I've ever had by far, but also one of the most difficult in that moment at that stage in my life was very much like going against, society and cultural norms. Also, I am first generation Canadian here also, and that like having the traumas and experiences of my parents and all their sacrifice to be able to say that I want to leave my comfortable, cushy, like 9 to 5 job in climbing the corporate ladder into climbing mountains around the world instead was by far like a lot of shame and guilt trying to make that decision, like so much in the pit of my stomach. But then at the same time, now gratefully, 5 plus years out of that decision, it has been by far the best, most fulfilling decision I've ever made.
Mm, I love this because, yeah, is this so true though? Does the decisions that are like really hard to make are also maybe just in hindsight incredibly easy to take, right? Because it was just kind of like, well, of course, yes, I gotta do this.
Yeah, I think that that's the thing about, you always hear from other fellow entrepreneurs, right? Is that you need to have that purpose or that clarity in place so that you're able to make these decisions. And I don't think there is any sort of like right or wrong answer for people, but it's rather, what is being pulled and challenged by for that decision as well to really help guide you as your North Star when it feels a little bit foggy some days also.
Hmm. Yeah, like I love that you brought up the North Star, and anyone who has worked with me on their brand is like, oh no, don't let her talk about the North Star. But it's so true, right? Like we need something that kind of like helps to pull us along when we're like in the midst of things, and especially when we're like, yeah, when we're doing decisions that go against what we have been conditioned to believe. And I mean, shame on you for not being a lawyer or a doctor anyway, right?
Exactly. I mean, I knew very early on that was not the path for me personally, you know, but it all worked out the way that it was meant to. I truly believe.
Oh God,
Thankfully.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. This is the thing. Like it's so interesting how like I grew up in in a in a totally different kind of environment, but not in the sense of they had like expectations like, oh, you have to become a lawyer or a doctor or a corporate job, but more in the sense of, oh, like whatever, she'll be fine. And this at first glance, this sounds very empowering, but it wasn't really. Like I
Mhm.
really had to figure it out by myself. And it was like, yeah, thanks, mom. Thanks, dad. That's we have to find a middle ground between those two extremes. But during like let's look back in that time where you're like, okay, now I know what I want. The corporate is not it. I want something else. I want to experience something else. Like how did you like make that decision? for yourself?
Yeah.
Was it
Well, I
like a
feel like
boom, Band-Aid ripoff, or was it like a slow process?
a bit of both, I would say. I think that it's all like a series of choices, right? That we make on a daily basis in each given moment. We might feel a little bit differently each day about it as well, right? So it's such a roller coaster in that sense. And if people are on that emotional roller coaster, like, population many, I imagine. But in terms of that decision, I feel like it had been brewing in terms of setting myself up for success in a way over a number of years because I had been freelancing while working in corporate as well to really have more of what people are striving for in terms of that stability and consistency in place to know that you are able to jump off the cliff and know that you're going to fall gracefully, in a way,
Mm-hmm.
or to have that net underneath essentially. So like it was important for me to make somewhat of a logical decision as much as my heart wanted to like jump
Yeah,
and
just
leave,
like burn bridges and be like,
right?
ah.
It's
Yeah.
and the thing is, I didn't even hate my job necessarily, but I just knew that
Yeah.
there was more out there also. And so for
Mm.
me, it wasn't necessarily, it was always that challenge of not settling, right? And so knowing that there was more out there for me and that I could be so much more excited, more fulfilled, more satisfied perhaps elsewhere. And I truly believe too, if you are talented and hardworking enough, like you can always go back and that's no problem also. People have priorities change all the time and it's no judgment, literally. I
Mm-hmm.
just maybe didn't find my dream job in the corporate setting of things. And so I had to kind of create my own version of what that looked like for my own career path. And so gratefully before the pandemic, I feel like I had basically gotten enough demand just as one human being, especially also being able to do all of the things. It wasn't sustainable to do all of it from morning to night to you're thinking about it sleeping dreaming about layouts also
No,
um
not a good look.
right. No, it's not cute. So knowing that and really coming to terms with making sure that I was prioritizing my own well-being, because that's actually one of the reasons that I started my first business like 10 years ago, was because a number of loved ones in my life had actually passed away. And it really made me reflect on how did I want to show up in the world? What was the legacy I wanted to put out there? How am I going to live in my values and truly like live, right? And
Mm.
so it's always come back to that sort of lesson that I keep learning time and time again in my life. And it's helped support me in making business decisions equally as much as well, and designing a way of life that I love, but also like a business that I love equally as much too, that they
Mm.
feel synchronistic in many
Mm-hmm.
ways, versus trying to strive for harmony, or like balance, right? That people
Mm-hmm.
are always looking for. So yeah, I think it kind of happened naturally in some ways that it was veering towards that path, but at the same time, I gave my resignation letter the same day I was flying to Greece one day as well, and then
That's the
came back
vibe.
to,
Yes, here
came
for
back to
this.
work, for a few weeks, to be somewhat respectful, and then jetted off and started my business, yeah, full time traveling the world. So
I
yeah.
love this. And oh God, you touched on so many important things. I'm like, I have to make a mental note of all the very smart things
Sorry.
she said, and
Yeah.
then I have to kind of like weave it all back together. But like, yes, like if you're listening, and this is very, very true what you said, right? Like you don't have to move into entrepreneurship because you just fucking hate your corporate job. Like you can, but you don't necessarily have to, right? It's you. I don't what I currently really don't like in the online space is all entrepreneurship is going to save you.
Mm,
Well, probably not if you approach it like this. um, and something like also another job can save you, or like the same job, like another job in the same company, or another role in another company, or whatever. Like it doesn't have to be entrepreneurship for everyone.
mhm.
I truly love it, but I don't think it's the cure all for everyone.
Yeah.
Um, so there's, and yeah, as you said, there no shame in going back or having an entrepreneurship and a part-time position, like whatever fucking works for you, right?
Hmm.
And I feel
Yeah,
there's so
it's
much,
really glamorized.
yes, and it's so much shame around like the side hustle and like what,
It's like all or nothing, right? Sort of
yeah,
approach
so
things.
unnecessary.
Hmm.
And I feel it just makes a lot of people feel bad that they're like, oh, but I'm still like working my 9 to 5, and then it means I'm not taking this seriously enough, or whatever. All these
Mhm.
limiting stories that we tell ourselves. So I'm really glad that you brought this up, and yeah, we're like, no, 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 not true. Smash, smash, next. And you also came back to like your North Star again, and I want to ask you, like, do you want to share your North Star, like your values with us? What do you like
Oh,
is the
yeah.
basis of the decisions you make for your life and business?
Yeah, it's because I find it so like intertwined towards one another. I think
Yeah.
it's been lovely to come back to these values time and time again, especially in those stickier moments in your life or your business as well. So I come back to these three ongoingly, and it's efficiency, integrity, and celebration are the three.
Oh, I like celebration in
Yeah.
the mix there.
Yes, because I truly believe, just to break it down a little bit further too, for context, like that efficiency piece, it really comes back to also destigmatizing a lot of that word productivity associated with efficiency for me and my clients as well. It's like, yes, we can get things done very quickly, but also honoring the time and space that it requires to do it done right
Yes.
also is really important for me. And then also in, being challenged by these stickier moments in life, having this integrity has been so important for me as well, to show up with grace for myself, for, others as well, with this compassion, but also being able to, yeah, lead in a way that feels right for me, and that feels like you're not faking it, like exactly what you see is what you get. So that integrity is so important for me to kind of lead forward with, and be an example for as well. But also then on the celebration side, it's really important for me to, acknowledge that there isn't always the bright, sunny unicorn type days, but how can we enjoy the journey and as much as the destination, and celebrate the wins along
Scenic
the
Route,
way,
everyone. Amen.
Yeah, it's so important.
Oh God. Yeah, I love this combination of the three. And it's really funny. The efficiency piece, I was like, yeah, it resonates with me. And because especially good things sometimes take a while. Um, Not always. But sometimes they just do. And there's sometimes this notion of the scenic route or the soft life of, okay, you're just chilling and not doing anything, and it's everything is just slow, and like there is no like grind and hustle and pressure, and I'm like, well, I everyone who knows me knows I can go hard. Ooh, I can go hard. But it's about the balance, right? It's not just going hard for the sake of going hard. If
Mhm.
you're in flow, and it's just oozing out of you, and you're getting shit done lightning speed,
Yeah.
that's amazing. If you experience this, if you're like, whoa, okay, I
It
did all of
exists.
this, and like, what, instead
Yes.
of like pushing through. So you
Yes.
really have to come into this efficiency
I
piece.
love
I love it.
I love that you mentioned flow, because I feel like it comes back to that nourishment of being intentional and focused as well. And it
Mm,
comes back to like those values and purpose as we talk about, right? Because I feel like when you're just stuffing up your calendar for the sake of being busy, so that you can, I don't, you wear that as a badge of honor or something, like that's something that I've had to really work through over the years, like
mm.
transparently also, and recovering, workaholic in many ways.
Recovering
But
people pleaser, and
yeah,
we're all in the remission here.
right. And so I really come to enjoy and come back to knowing also a lot of inspiration from nature of, the seasons. Uh,
Mm,
like we all are not meant to be in full bloom all the time. And you're meant to like have those slower moments where you can start planting things and, laying down the foundations and all these things so that you can bloom so much more of a flourish season in
yeah.
the future.
Yeah, it's very true, right? Like you're always planning, as you said before, like it's all just a series of choices, and it's always you're always planting a seed. And oftentimes, like more often than not, you have no idea what's going to become of the seed, if anything at all, right? And you're just, I don't know, going merrily away and planting seeds. And if you're not enjoying this process of going merrily and planting seeds, you're
Mhm.
just waiting desperately for whatever is there to bloom. And you're
Yeah.
wasting so much life space with it. It's kind of sad.
Yeah. I like this analogy though. In some ways, it's like, okay, you know what? If you get a rabbit that happens to come into your garden and like accidentally moves your tulip bulbs and replaces it with like a potato or something like that, and maybe that's like what you really needed instead, you know? And so I think life
What?
is full of surprises,
Wait, there's a potato plant in my tulip garden. But yeah,
right?
yeah.
So you never know what you might need versus sometimes what you think that you want.
Oh, yeah. And what you want to hear is most likely not what you need to hear.
Yeah. So even as you mentioned too, Jennifer, I feel like changing roles in your career, I feel like equally as much to finding the right people to surround yourselves with in that environmental impact that you're
Mm,
experiencing perhaps makes such a world of difference as well because these are the noises that you hear in terms of like the people around you, what the language of, the vocabulary of things of how they're speaking about their life and, all these things that it has such an impact on how we live our lives. And then are you absorbing other people's perceptions or projections of you, or is it
mm.
really yours at the end of the day?
Yes, this is so true. And I really believe this goes for values too, right? It's really hard to I remember when I was at the beginning of of this kind of like untangling process, it was really hard to figure out, is this something I want? Or is this something I think I should want? Or is this something I think my mother wants for me? Or uh
Mhm. Yeah.
so how did you, I mean, you've listed your three values beautifully. How was the process of like discovering them? Do you have a process that you maybe also guide your clients through? Or like how, I mean, I don't think you sat down one day and like, oh, I'm gonna write down my values today.
Right.
But
I mean, yeah, I think it's important to reassess often, as well to just
mhm,
check in with yourself, as we say, like quiet the noise a little bit
yeah.
too. So I like to look at it more deeply, I would say, like on an annual basis, just to check in if it still aligns with, how I want to move through life also.
Mhm,
But I would say at the very, very beginning of this sort of journey of identifying these three in particular is that the integrity one actually in particular has changed slightly. I feel like
mm.
each of them has kind of remained at core, but the integrity one used to be
How you live it
transparency.
out in that.
Yeah,
Mm,
exactly. And like things shift and evolve also, but um I had really sat with it, especially during that period of that year, that first year, especially when I had left my job in the
mm,
corporate world to start full time into my entrepreneurship journey. I really had to sit with, what's really important for me. Um, in what place am I making these decisions? Even just like as simple as maybe like how you're making your lunch decisions, right? It's like if I value efficiency, for example, and I have a really busy work day and it demands a lot of my capacity and attention, and I still want to prioritize my well-being and nourishment, perhaps I am going to Uber eat something, right? And
mhm.
so it's interesting to see how your values show up in different decision-making things, even yeah, as minute as picking out lunch, right? So that when you do get to those bigger business decisions of like how you're going to reinvest into your business or the type of people that you're going to work with, all these kind of come into play as
Mm,
well. But I love coming back to Brene Brown's values exercises in particular. And so she has like a long list of them. And I go through them with all my branding clients, especially to work through narrowing down, into your top 10 and then even further to your top five. And then ideally you get to a core 2 to 3. I feel like having those core 2 to 3 in particular are more, again, intentional versus
mm.
having a list of 10. It can start to get a little bit muddled in some
Yeah,
sense when you're making decisions, right?
yeah, I know what you mean. And i- is there still like a pro like a conscious or unconscious way of like making decisions when like you're unsure, do you consciously think of like, oh, these are my values and which ones like align with my decision, or how would my decision look like if I would like follow one or all of the values?
Yeah, I would say especially the integrity one is what comes to surface most
Mm.
highly, I
Yeah.
guess, or most frequent during these difficult times, especially because I find I've been asking myself in those moments, what is the type of boss that I would like to be or aspire to be also. And so I'll make decisions based on how would I feel most proud and integral to show up. And if it was exposed to the world, for example,
Mm-hmm.
even like, would I be happy to have this version of myself, showcased? And so it's
Mm.
really helped
Yeah.
me put things into perspective.
Yeah, and it's also probably interesting, like the, I mean, the value piece. What I mean, it's one thing, right? Like you've said it. You also listed your values and they're nouns, but like a value ultimately is a is a verb. It's something you do, right? So how, like, what are like the core behaviors that support your values, like how you live them out, like how do you live them out in your daily life?
Yeah, I would say the efficiency piece definitely on a more probably day-to-day
Mm,
operational basis you see in terms of like onboarding to thankfully my really great systems and tools that I use on an ongoing
mm,
basis in my business, the type of communications that I have with any sort of contractors or clients, for example, right? Those are typically the pieces that show up in the efficiency side in particular. And
mm,
then in the integrity side, I think especially in stickier moments, that's where it really shows up. Again, like kind of prompting based on those reflection questions that we just talked about.
mm,
Um, and then also even just like in referrals, like I'm happy to, share introductions to folks all the time as well. Like
yeah.
this is just part of my DNA. But then also on the celebration side of it, it shows up a lot. I feel like in the social media space when I'm connecting with other folks in my community as well, it's really important for me to be able to celebrate other folks equally as much of what
Mm,
they're doing because it just like re-inspires and refills my cup as well in many ways. But also during my offboarding as well with clients, like I always like to ask them, how do you like to celebrate big wins, good news, all that stuff? And then I
yeah.
like to send them a personalized gift after the first time we've worked together as well. And so this way it just feels, yeah, hyper tailored and, special to them in that
Mm-hmm.
way of how they like to celebrate to honor that part of the process too.
Yeah. Oh, I love this. How you can really let your values kind of like reflect through your entire, I don't know, client life cycle, client funnel, whatever you want to call it, through like your entire relationship of be like, hey, how can I like foster this? And like, how can I, yeah, bring, what can I do that's maybe a bit unexpected
Mhm.
just to,
A delightful
yeah,
surprise. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Oh, this is really nice. Yeah, I love that you touched up on this. Are there other examples that where you're like, where people, when people are like, oh, this is really cool, I want to do like do something like this too? Is this like from your client work, do you think there's like a real ideal place or situation where you can bring something in? Like,
Mm,
what do you advise your clients when they're like, oh, I want to do something like this and I know my values, and like, okay, how can we like, I don't know, make something like this and like our own, not just like copy, I don't know,
yeah.
whatever Christine's doing.
I mean, you know what? I think this is a really interesting topic that you bring up because I feel like a lot of clients struggle with the vocabulary piece in our branding world, especially, right? So even I think
Oh,
language is
true.
so
Very
powerful.
true. Very true.
So I think this
Yes.
could be an interesting conversation to have in terms of, that's why it's really important for me to just get on the same page from the very beginning when we have our consultation together, because this way, when you say bold, for example, or elegant, sophisticated, let's just say, that might look very different in your head than,
Oh God,
the
yes. Oh
example
God, you could ask
that
10
you
people what
have,
does elegant
right?
mean, and you get like 10 different
10 different examples.
vision boards or
Exactly.
whatever. Yeah.
Right. And so we both seen it like time and time
Oh dear
again.
Lord. Yes.
And then to see then the visual examples, which I always ask for also. So not only the vocabulary of how you're describing things and the languages that you're using, but also the visual translation of what you're envisioning that to mean to you is
Hmm.
equally important, so that then I can ask, like, as the expert to clarify even further
Yeah.
what that vision is, right? And so it's really important for me to dissect that, because that way we're speaking the same language, no matter if we have the same 101 vocabulary or not. Like, it doesn't really
Hmm.
matter at that point. It's
Yeah.
really about being able to communicate clearly, right? And so I think that's
God,
why
yes.
it's so important for clients ideally to have tried a few things out on their own also. I really love. I
Hmm.
know it can be sticky, but at the same time, I think it really gives them clarity equally as much to know what they equally don't like as part of the process to narrow down.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I personally I love and I don't know. I'm very knowledgeable client compared to someone who doesn't really care, right? I don't know the way I brand. Like I cannot brand for you. Like you have to tell me who you are, and the better you know yourself, the easier and smoother and enjoyable this process gets, and the more likely we're gonna hit it big.
Do you feel like, Jennifer, actually also that you feel part like therapist in a way when you work with your clients? So the reason that I say this, for context also, is like, to your point, I feel like a lot of the work that we do as part of brand experts is very much psychology based, right? From the colors that we choose,
Yes.
the emotional impact of it. Yeah, who are you? Like, these are simple questions in theory, but they're such deep questions that not a lot of people think about.
Yes. And I mean, adding to that I don't know, the color red means something totally different in Europe than it does in Asia. Or
Uh-huh.
like you have so many cultural differences as well on top of that, and then adding to markets and niches. And yes, you can use the color black in, I don't know, the wellness industry. I mean, always for disrupting something, but you got to be well aware that you're disrupting. Otherwise, it's not gonna. It's gotta be just gotta be sticky, right? This is really funny. Yes. I yeah. I'm I yes, I am definitely part therapist, and it has also kind of like been my personal journey of the past couple of months, where I'm like, you know, I'm kind of ready to leave branding and really go more into the therapist coaching kind of world, because this is currently where I feel like I'm most at home. um but yeah, 100%. And it's also kind of started that I was like, oh, okay, I got this, what we said at the beginning, like we like, I've always, when you're around, when you've been around here at the Scenic Route Podcast, I'm not always, like, I'm always saying like, oh, strategy is like just one bit, right? You need like the spirit piece of like your intuition and your like the somatic experience of your body, right? When there could be like a strategic, very smart decision, but if you feel there's a pit in your stomach every time you think about it, it might not be the decision for you right now. So and always like, oh, you need to balance all of those. And so I started learning and training in different modalities like NLP or tapping, the EFT freedom technique tapping, which is the recent one. Of like, okay, we need to like balance everything in. And when you work on this and then you brand,
Hmm.
oh, there's magic that's coming. Magic. I'm like, yes. Oh,
Yeah, it
here
can
for
be an
this.
incredibly healing of a process to go through, like,
Mm.
to I always like to say it is the most courageous thing to like live your truth and to like truly live in your values of it. Because I
Yes.
think not, I don't believe that, majority of the world is. And I feel like it's such a beautiful thing when you can live so authentically and within those values. You just have such a deeper sense of fulfillment from it that and like radiance that you might not have experienced yet.
Yes, absolutely true. And the whole thing of like being authentic on social media and all these things, right? Like it just kind of like falls away. It, you don't have to think about
Yeah.
what do
I
I
know.
post.
Hmm.
Yeah, it just kind of like falls off and you're like, you know what? I'll just post whatever is kind of like in line or with my North Star or with my values or with my true self, however you want to refer to it. And this is what I love about it. It's A, like magnetic and attractive as fuck. And B, it's also giving like kind of, I hate this kind of like the word, oh, it's giving permission to others to do the same. But it's, it maybe inspires them or motivates them to be like, you know what? Like,
Hmm.
she looks like me. She talks like me. She does it. Hey, you know what? Maybe I can do it too. And this is really cool. And where the whole like, yeah, and representation piece also comes in, right? When we see more people doing entrepreneurship from a different perspective that's not the hustle and the grind or the girl boss or whatever narrative, but just like ordinary Janes want to have some fun doing something they like and getting paid for it. It oh, tell me, Christine, if this also resonates with your client work. Just had this like pop up sometimes when I do the value work with clients. They're almost like they don't feel this is their value because it doesn't feel like deep enough. You know
Mm,
what I mean? Like they feel it has to be something like growth
yeah.
or freedom. Yes, I'm really sorry if you're listening to this on the podcast version. You're not seeing my fantastic hand gestures. So
The full effect.
you
Yeah.
should go to YouTube and watch it there for full effect. For like, yes, thank you. Disclaimer. But, they always feel like, oh, it has to be something like leadership, growth, heritage, something super deep.
Mm,
Whereas it could just also be fun
yeah.
or curiosity. Like
Uh-huh. Ooh, yes.
has it come
All of
across?
this.
Has this come across?
Absolutely. I feel like also the simplicity is so underrated and right? Like
Yeah.
like not only in this values exercise and narrowing things down, but also like from a branding perspective, like from a visual communications approach, like simplicity is really hard to achieve in many ways as well, right? Like
It's the
the
hardest.
simplest of logos,
Clutter
like
everything over is super easy.
exactly, right? Like this is why McDonald's and Nike or Starbucks, they're all so iconic, right? Like you can each every time that I just said those words, I know that each listener already had their logo pop in their head, right?
Yeah.
Like these are the moments where being able to really get to such a cellular, like individual level of how you can break things down. Because if you're keeping it simple and easy for yourself, imagine how clear that crystal clear that is to your target audience then, right? Or your
Mm.
dream clients. Because if you're confused, likely your audience is also. So that's kind of like how I like to put it into perspective, you know?
True. But I'm also working with a lot of clients who it might not be as easy for them to explain what they do, right?
Mm.
Um, and this goes for a lot of them are in kind of like the wellness therapy kind of or coaching industry where like when you do websites, it it is somewhat clear what you do. I've always felt when I talk about branding, it gets a little murkier because it's not just, if I would say I'm a logo designer, then it'd be like, yeah, I do logos. But if I say I'm branding, it's kind of like, oh, let's wait, a lot of to unpack. So
Hmm.
what what do you have like an advice for people who where it is kind of murky to explain what they do? They
Yeah.
might not even like really sure, like they know what, I mean, they know like they do coaching, but I don't know.
I think it's the
Do I make any sense?
ambiguity. Yeah. I think, it comes back down to, I feel like setting expectations we talked about earlier too, right? It's
Mm,
like, are people going to have like an entry point or an access point to be able to like build enough intrigue to feel brave enough to take that next step to reach out to you, right?
mm,
Thinking about like the customer journey of things and making it
yes.
easy and welcoming for people to invite them to take that next step because it does take multiple touch points to get them there, right? And being conscious of that, but at the same time, what's gonna yeah, well, like, are you going to promote a sense of understanding ultimately of meeting people where they're at equally as much? Because I feel like those are the most powerful brands that showcase some sort of sense of vulnerability or understanding because
Yeah,
people just want to feel seen and heard at the end of the day, right? And
yeah.
appreciated in that way versus the one that feels sometimes overly aspirational that you don't have any sort of connection point to, even take that next step, or it's like it's too intimidating, perhaps, as well. I've heard a lot of, right? So,
Oh, this is,
yeah.
yes, yes. This brings to mind Rachel Hollisgate of, I don't know, 2021 or so. I don't know. It was it she got in a bit of a shitstorm for saying in a TikTok something along the lines of, "Oh, I'm don't like I don't strive to be like relatable."
Mm,
And it's like, yes, but if you're not relatable, and it's so lovely that you said this, Christine, it can be too far out of fucking reach. It's like so glossy that when, I don't know, when I look at him, like, yeah, no, like it's too off-putting.
yeah.
And
Well,
sometimes it's my own bullshit limiting stories, sure, but yeah, I'm glad you said this.
I think it's important to, yeah, like you said, especially if you are the service or product like provider that is working so intimately in the space, especially in the wellness space where it is such a like vulnerable thing to show up as, like they want to know that they can talk to you and reach out to you on like on a human level, right? Like
Mm,
I don't in the especially in the world of the digital landscape that's creating so much AI bots out there, like people are craving that connection more than
yeah.
anything now. And I feel like for me personally, and for I feel like a lot of folks, they really want a humanized brand moving forward so that they feel like they there is that like emotional impact still.
Yes. And I mean, the humanized brand, I mean, that goes back to the very origins of branding, right? Like with like Uncle Ben's fries and whatever, like, and on Gemma's pancake mixes or whatever,
Yeah.
right? Like, I mean, we always had this thing of like humanizing brands, which I must say, I'm not really a big fan of big corporations doing this because who are you trying to fool here? Right? Like, or if you see big online business gurus having this over personified humanized brand when you damn well know they have like a team of 50 working for them, not such a big fan, but but at the same time, and equally true for like, just infuse more of your humanness
Hmm.
in whatever you do and let it like show up in your values, right? However you like, you, yeah, however, whatever kind of values you've set for yourself, but just, yeah, allow yourself and your brand and business to be more fully human, and then run with it. Because if you're listening to this, it's a fat chance you don't own like a $70 billion company with like a gazillion of employees. Maybe you do, I don't know. um so just, yeah, use your one person business as your strength, and just really like be be that. And I love what you said, that people at the end of the day do business with people and want to do business with people. Otherwise, they just, I don't know, would ask ChatGPT.
Yeah, exactly, right? There's so many other routes that you could
Oh,
go now if you so
yeah,
choose.
absolutely. And I'd say it's not even just true for the wellness industry, right? Like there are
Mhm.
so many people who do brands and websites. I mean, I don't, gazillion of people, and they're probably all very super as talented and as gorgeous and great as we two are. But ultimately, like, if if you can't stand my face or Christine's face, like, don't hire us. Like, it would not be fun for anyone. Right? Like, it's just, that's why, I don't know, it's always also the lovely side effect of if you show up with your values. Like,
You
one
find
thing
the
I
right
always,
people.
yes. And
Mhm.
it's always like, sometimes I get clients asking me, well, like, how do you handle these tricky clients when you have to like reschedule meetings and something? And I'm like, I just rescheduled meetings
Yeah.
because tell them I am sick, or I'm not feeling well, or my kid just throw up all over the floor. And they're like, yeah, sure, life happens. Like, sure,
Yes.
let me know when you're free. It's never a big deal because I'm very upfront with, look, this is what's going on. And if you're like, oh God, no, how can you do business like this? Then, well, please do not bring your business my way. Please. Like,
Mhm.
how did like, I feel you, I deeply sense you approach this very similar to me.
Yeah, I'm very direct also when I approach things. But even, we've rescheduled this one, for example, the
Very true.
podcast,
Very
right?
true.
And it
Very
was no
true.
problem. Like it was easy. And I think that's like the feedback that I keep getting also when I offboard clients and I ask them for feedback as well each time to help continue improving the process for myself and for future
Mm,
clients. It's like they always say how easy it is. And it's like, or they really appreciated the moments when, yeah, maybe their kid was sick at home and, they needed to change things around in their schedule that day. No problem. Like, happy to accommodate. Like, I can understand as long as they have this level of commitment and towards what they want to accomplish together in this collaborative setting and
yes.
being mindful of one another and respectful ultimately too, then I have no issue, like no problem.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, granted, like, being mindful and respectful of everyone's time, and sometimes shit just hits the fan, and you're like rolling with the punches, cleaning up the vomit. You're like, life is good. It's all good.
But that's why, yeah, purpose and intention is so important in those moments, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Christine, this has been such a really fun conversation. We've covered life and business and everything in between, as we always kind of do on a scenic route. Before I let you off the hook, tell people where they can find you if they're like, oh, yes, I want to work with Christine. Where do you hang out online?
Yeah, you can definitely find me. You can continue chatting about an upcoming exciting project together at christineldesigns.com, or I'm usually hanging out on Instagram primarily also at underscore CLIEU.
Perfect. We will link that in the show notes. And I've always one last question before I let anyone off finally off the hook. What book are you currently reading, or what audiobook you're listening to?
Yes, I'm reading actually, it was gifted by a friend of mine, and fellow business owner. It's called The Gap and the Gain. And
Oh, I never
it's
heard of that one.
been so lovely. And it's really helped to really, yeah, focus on the gains and the progress of things versus the gaps and scarcity that we sometimes fall into. So
Mm.
I'll just like read a chapter in the mornings to set the tone for my day, and it's been the perfect mix to wake up to.
I'm just seeing the tagline of the book, and it's called The High Achiever's Guide to Happiness. I'm
Mm.
like, yeah, well, that checks out. Okay, I'm loving this already. So this book goes on a Scenic Route book club list. So whenever you're like, okay, I'm through whatever I'm currently reading and I need new inspiration, go have a look. It will be linked there. The gap and the game. Oh, the gap and the gain? The gap, the gap and the gain.
Yeah.
Yeah. I understood first the gap in the game. This doesn't make any sense. Fair enough. Okay, so I'd say my brain is shutting off now. So, Christine, again, thank you so much for being on the scenic route with me.
Thank you so much for having me.